James continues to call for alignment and consistency. Let me jump in. There's so much in here, and again, we sort of have this broad Bible study, and I'm only going to take, I tell you this every week, I'm only going to take 15 to 20 minutes. I know you're used to me taking 30 or 35, whatever, but this sort of section is for me to just share a few, not to explain the whole passage, which there's a lot to talk about here. And the reason I don't feel the need to go deeply into it is because James is going to retouch on this numerous times. So we're just going to have a few conversations here together over the course of a month about like gossip and slander and division and the use of our words, the taming of our tongues. So I don't need to talk about everything this morning, but just a few thoughts from my sort of reflection in this text this week. James continues to call for our alignment and consistency between our outer lives and our inner lives. Alignment between who we say we are and our action. Again, all this stuff, the last 2 or 3 chapters are just him continuing to flow out of that little line where he says, be doers of the word, not just hearers. Be doers of the word, not just hearers. And then he just goes for 2 or 3 chapters talking about that. Be doers of the word and not just hearers. If you're a fig tree, bear figs. Or just be honest that you aren't a fig tree. That's the other option. Either bear figs or be honest that you're not a fig tree. If you're a grapevine, bear grapes. Or just be honest that you aren't a grapevine. It's not asking for perfection. It's asking for consistency and integrity. And so be doers of the word, not just hearers. And he talks about caring for widows and orphans. We talked about that a few weeks ago. To tend to our holiness, to care about our morality, to care about our contrast ethic from the society around us, to show no partiality. We talked about that 2 or 3 weeks ago. And now he turns to the taming of our tongues. We have come out of cultural times and environments, not recently, but we've come out of cultural times and environments where we believe our words are these harmless things, these innocent things, these neutral things, that we can be loose with because they're not all that effective or affecting on the world around us. We say on average 6,000 words per day. Now that's an average. There's a huge spectrum there. The introverts in the room are like, I haven't said 6,000 words ever, like in my life. I say 60 words a day and I count them. I have like an allotment of daily words. I hold some back the next day, and then there's extroverts. I don't know any personally that actually say a lot of words. They say a lot of words. All the time they say words. So there's a vast spectrum there on personality, on the type of job you have. If your job, people sit and code all day, they're probably closer to 60 words. The people who have sales jobs or something like that, they're probably going to be speaking a whole lot more words than that. Depends on your personality, depends on your job. I'm just going to read this data. It is what it is. Working males average 2,000 to 3,000 words per day spoken. Working females average from 10,000 to 20,000 words per day. I'm just reading data. We have to repeat ourselves. That's good. That's very good. That's very, very good. Point taken.
Is that really? Very true.
That's very true. Actually, 30 times. It takes 3 times. This data set actually had this, again, I think it's interesting, but it said men 2,000 to 3,000 words delivered a day, females 10,000 to 20,000 average words delivered a day. However, both average 500 to 700 words of actual value. It's just the data, man. It's just the data. But it says, here's why. It says, which means, their interpretation was, which means ladies add a great deal of filler to their conversations. And men are very tight. And I add filler. I'm probably close to 50,000 words a day. My staff knows it. I mean, I'll work at my desk for a grand total of 5 minutes, and if I haven't talked to a person, I turn around and I just find somebody to talk to. I used to have to, the team worked over there, and I used to corner myself and work back here. It was good for everybody involved. It was better for everyone. So I fill all my conversation. I'm filling this sermon with too many words right now. It's happening right now. Filler words. Totally unnecessary. It's Sticks and stones may break our bones, but words can never hurt us. This is the saying that we had growing up. People don't say that anymore, by the way, but this was the saying that we had growing up. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt us. We swim in the receiving of words and the delivery of words, thousands of words all day, every day. And if I started to get to a point where if people started telling me that sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never hurt you, all that told me was that this person had never tried to love before. Anyone. If you don't want words to hurt you, then you have to live completely alone and don't bother with that pesky little thing called love. Because words will hurt, and they'll hurt deep. They'll hurt deeper than the sticks and stones could ever touch if they're coming from a source whom you intended all along to love. And you've wanted to love. But James reminds us that words are actually the opposite of these harmless, innocent, inconsequential things that sometimes, harmless things that we can make them seem to be. The horse is controlled by a small bit. Like the tongue can control us, our body, our communities. The horse is controlled by the small bit, so the tongue can control us. It's an interesting thing because from the heart the mouth speaks. So that gives the impression that the body, the heart, the person actually controls the words coming out. And this is sort of saying the other thing, that the mouth actually has this reverse effect. It controls the horse. It steers the ship. And I actually think both are a little bit true, that it's an interdependent relationship. From the heart, the mouth speaks, and as the mouth speaks, the heart solidifies. Our friend Alan Hirsch would always say, you don't think your way into a new way of being, you act your way into a new way of thinking. The way that you believe and think and act are these interdependent things, and you can actually have there are cycles, and you can either have a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle in these interdependent relationships. And your words do that for your heart. They come from the heart and they solidify the heart. They control and guide the formation of the heart. It's a cycle that can either be vicious or virtuous. The ship is guided by a small rudder. So the tongue controls us in the present, but it can actually guide our future. It can guide our destiny. Our future destiny can be guided by our words, the words we say and the words we receive. And those might have been some of the things that you shared at your table, things that either people spoke to you and shifted that your future, shifted how you saw yourself, shifted what you thought was possible. It made tectonic shifts to your destiny. And in the same way, there are words that we can deliver that actually guide and shape people's destiny, future. So the horse, we can be controlled by the tongue in the present. It can guide our future. And at the same time, the tongue is like a forest fire caused by a little spark. It can destroy. It can destroy from such a small thing. It can destroy. And every ministry leader in here who's been at this longer than like 18 months has seen the way that words can destroy a person, a family, a community. It can have devastating effects, these little harmless things we call words. It is an unstable evil, a double mind. I don't like the word restless. That original term in there, and maybe in your text that's restless. It's a double-minded evil, an unstable evil. Set on fire by hell, to corrupt with deadly poison, like a snake bite. We can actually, our words, even without us knowing it, our words can actually collaborate with the evil one and his intentions in the world. So these are not harmless, inconsequential things. They can control, they can guide, they can destroy, they can collaborate with evil. And I actually think we're closer in my lifetime to a culture around us that actually has a collective understanding and appreciation for the power of words. That's why I said earlier, people used to say, sticks and stones break my bones, but words never hear. I never hear anybody say that anymore. That's not a thing. Because we've learned over time, I guess in the last 20, 30, 40 years, that words are actually incredibly powerful. But in my opinion, and I just want to explore this for a second with you, I actually think there are some ways that we've overcorrected to the effect and the power of words. In 2023, the saying might be, sticks and stones may break your bones, but you can at least recover. Words leave you no recovery. There is no coming back from words. And 2023 is the age where I think we've simultaneously underestimated the power of words and overestimated the power of words, the power of the tongue. We've underestimated it because we've as a collective, we've seen the way that misinformation and disinformation campaigns can actually control geopolitical and societal shifts entirely. And we were completely underestimated how that was going to go about and how to play out. And global leaders with nefarious intentions for human society actually think their best weapon, if they can control it, is words and information. And in some ways, we've realized over the last 4 to 6 years, beyond that, 5 to 10 years, the way that we have collectively underestimated the power of words. Underestimated. Kids on cell phones. It's a situation, again, where we're starting to realize just how much we have underestimated the power of words on a human being. The amount of information that kids on cell phones can have access to, what that information does to them, the power that just words and the intake of information through social media platforms has on childhood development, on, I think, anybody over the age of 20, honestly. If I wish I never touched a cell phone until I was much older than what I was. The way that we consume information. We still read the same amount of words, but we read it in 140 character tweets. We don't read books anymore. We don't read long form information anymore. And the way that that's changing our brains, our ability to actually engage in long form argumentation, our ability to actually learn through long form mediums, it's changing us in ways that I think we're underestimating. But in other ways, we've overcorrected, and I think our cultural environment that we exist in. There are some ways we've underestimated the power of words, and in other ways, I think we've overcorrected to believe that they're far too more than they actually are. By believing that words can actually do violence to our bodies, they cannot. They cannot. But these kinds of little incendiary ideas is what's leading to things like, and now I'm not going to blanket say these are a bad idea, but the general application of things like trigger warnings and ideological safe spaces and cancel culture and the decimation of free speech on college campuses and the way that that's seeping out to broader society now. That all comes from an overestimation of the power of words and the belief that we can control it. The effects of those powers of words. And all that little incendiary idea that words actually cause violence and therefore and violence from which we can never return. And therefore there should be ideological safe spaces where certain words are not allowed to be said. There should be trigger warnings so that people can choose to opt out of certain words. There should be cancel culture so that people who say certain words can never be heard from again. And now the large-scale decimation of free speech. What that has produced in 5 to 10 years is evidence-based, data-proven, more fragile, mentally ill people. It's actually causing it's not causing human flourishing by any metric, which is what we hope to achieve by it. We want to produce flourishing, joy, love, beauty, wonder, and all it's creating is the opposite in every way. In every way. So this is a weird time to think about. This is again, we're going to be talking about words and taming the tongue here for 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm not going to go too far, but I just want to get us all in the same place that we're in a cultural environment where the view of words and their deployment is really complicated right now. Because people see and understand their power in a way that they haven't in previous generations, and people are simultaneously underestimating their effect and overestimating their effect in many ways. And trying to deal with those words in ways that are fundamentally unwise in both ways. So in a complex culture like this, in a moment like this, where words are everywhere, 6,000 of them a day that we're giving, 10,000 of them a day that we're on the receiving end of, and people's attunement to the power of words is high, and people's reaction to that awareness of the power of words is both overblown and underblown. What are we to do as missional leaders who follow Jesus and hope to see his kingdom indwell in the earth? What do we do? I think in a verbally reactive world that's on fire, it should be our aim to cultivate freshwater springs of verbally intentional communities that flourish. It should not even be on your mind to somehow like change the world or impact everything, but you have a little sphere. You have your life, you have your family, you have your friends, you have those to whom you're called. You have a little community that you're a part of and you steward. And there should be a collective vision for that thing to be a verbally intentional community that grounds fresh water in the forest fire. A contrast community. We see our words differently. We treat our words differently. We communicate differently to one another. And we offer a whole lot of grace in the meantime. I caught myself remembering this week the profound book Living into Community by Christine Pulley, which you've probably heard me talk about at this point a dozen times because it's about the best community, the book on community that I've ever read. I think it's extremely helpful for microchurch leaders to hear and understand. I think it's incredibly helpful for a world that is in an epidemic of loneliness to understand how communities form and flourish. And so I just want to give you a brief summary of that book really quick because I was struck by it this week again. The Christine Pulley actually, it's sort of like a PhD level work. She did a bunch of research. She researched hundreds, if not thousands, of Christian communities of any kind across multiple spectrums around the world. Small churches, large churches, house churches, mega churches, nonprofits, teams, staff teams, all kinds of cross-denomination, cross-political spectrum, cross-ethnicity and culture, all this kind of stuff. The book is called Living into Community by Christine Pulley. And essentially the driving question of her research is are there a handful of practices that help create flourishing communities across all these spectrums? And are there certain practices that kill community, that harm community? And how can we sort of understand how communities are formed transcendently, not contextually, but across all these spectrums? And she wrote the book Living into Community to describe the 4 practices that help communities flourish of any kind. And the opposite of each of those practices are 4 destructive poisons to communities of any kind. I'll just go through them really briefly. The first practice is expressing gratitude. Expressing gratitude. Explicitly expressing gratitude. That communities that she found of any kind, 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 40 people, no matter where on the political spectrum, no matter what, she even did socioeconomic stuff. Communities that were affluent, communities that were below the poverty line. That communities that were objectively defined as healthy and flourishing, what almost all of them had in common was an explicit rhythm of continuously expressing gratitude with one another. Thankful to God, thankful for each other, thankful for their position in life, what they had, and did not leave that gratitude assumed by themselves or others, but expressed it constantly. I thank God for you in my life for these reasons. I thank God for this experience I went through, and I just wanted to tell you all about it. I wanted to testify about that I went through an experience, and I'm grateful to God in these particular ways. It's a community saturated in gratitude. The antithesis to that one was that will kill communities is a culture of complaint and critique. That what would happen is that communities would there's a term out there called trauma bonding. Essentially, communities would get together with the intent of being a flourishing, beautiful, wonderful community, but they would essentially, all that they would do was bear one another's burdens. They would even have Bible language to describe it. But they would never celebrate one another's victories or name what God was doing in the room that was good and that they were thankful for. The communities basically just become a pressure release valve for things that are hard or things that we don't like about each other or things that are missing here or missing in your life or missing from as a consumer of this community, you're not meeting my needs in these ways. And as soon as you meet those ways, I'll find 3 or 4 more that you're not meeting. Will kill community. The second one is telling the truth. Telling the truth. So the first one's expressing gratitude. The second one is telling the truth. Telling the truth both in encouraging ways and telling the truth in confrontational ways. Telling the truth to one another about one another. Telling the truth about God to one another about one another. The antithesis to that was deception. Either intentional deception or sort of a fake peace, faux peace. Fake peace, which is basically the only held together because nobody's telling the truth. Because we're afraid what would happen if I were to tell the truth. Communities were destroyed by either direct, discovered, constant deception, or this sort of fake peace, passive aggressiveness. The third one that built, so again, expressing gratitude, telling the truth. The third one is making and keeping promises. Making and keeping promises. Explicitly to one another. So instead of just, every time you're together, we're just having dinner, or we're just studying the Word, or we're just sort of like going and doing outreaches together, and there's no explicit commitment from one person to another person, or from each other to the community that I am here for these reasons. You can count on me in these ways. I'm committed to this life with you. These practices, these values, I'm committed to it with you. Eye to eye. I'm committed to you. I'm committed to this community. I'm committed to being this type of people in this time. Together. Making and keeping promises. The thing that would destroy community was betrayal. On the other end of making and keeping promises. And that betrayal could either be direct betrayal of a spoken commitment, or it could be a betrayal, a indirect betrayal of unspoken expectations. A lot of times when you don't have a community that makes and keeps promises, people they feel betrayed, but they feel betrayed because you didn't live up to expectations that you never made or committed to in the first place. So they feel like it was a betrayal, and if there's no sort of ethic of communicating clearly what our expectations are for each other and how we're committed to each other, you can brew people's feelings of disappointment and betrayal that way. The fourth one is hospitality. To have an open door, open life. And not just hospitality in your home, openness of your life and your community. To be open to newcomers all the time. That hospitality, a lot of times people who want to build a flourishing community feel like hospitality is a threat. Because they feel like we need to build this thing first before we can let new people into it. And we're not quite there. And we're not quite flourishing or wonderful or awesome quite yet to invite new people into it. And new people might throw off the whole dynamic and throw the whole thing off or whatever. And her study basically says the opposite. That hospitality actually helps it get to health and hold in health along the way. If people actually maintain open door, open life policy with newcomers all the time. And the unhealthy thing would be to be exclusive, or to remain in isolation, to be a community that excludes others, or shows partiality, or remains in isolation. So that's the summary of the book. You're very welcome. You can go buy it on Amazon. Let's pray. We're done today. No. So the reason it came to my mind is because just a quick aside. There's this theory that a lot of our core freedoms, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to convene, freedom to gather, freedom to demonstrate. That a lot of our freedoms that we have are actually all based on the freedom to transact. That if we don't have the freedom, now you don't have to pay deeply attention to me, but it's if you don't have the freedom to transact in a society, like the freedom to have a financial autonomy, and that there's control over the banking system and your ability to transact. That if you don't have the freedom to transact, you lose all those other freedoms. You no longer have, and you could be in a society that actually holds to those freedoms, but if they take away your freedom to transact, you lose all the others, even if you think you have them. The reason I say that is because almost the same principle applies to these things, where you could almost think, yeah, our community is we want to express gratitude, we want to have a culture of hospitality, we want to tell the truth to one another, we want to make and keep promises. But if you don't first agree to take ownership and responsibility of the taming of your tongue to be an intentional community with your words and surrender to Jesus, you lose all of it. All four of those are based on words. Expressing gratitude, that's your words. Making and keeping promises, that's being intentional with your words. Hospitality, being able to invite people to be a part of your life, to welcome people in to be a part of your life, to make and keep promises, to tell the truth. These are all the usage of your words. And I've been in plenty of communities before that have known these things and wanted to pursue these things, and we actually thought we were pursuing them. But the problem was we did not first take ownership of our tongues. To actually feel like I'm responsible for my lips, my words. And I can't just be a freely reactive person with completely unintentional and completely non-proactive, but reactive with my words all the time and expect to find these things. I have to be disciplined with my words, my mouth, my lips, my tongue. All four require words. One factor makes or breaks communities. It's not the strategy. It's not the metrics. It's not how good the dinner is. It's not the gift mix in the room. I used to tell intentional communities that live together that the community lives and dies at the kitchen sink, the dishes. If you try to live in an intentional community, those of you who have lived in an intentional community before, it lives and dies at the kitchen sink. Now, that's not true. Every microchurch, every community lives and dies with your words. It lives and dies with your words. When we surrender our tongue to Jesus, he will lead us to embody and cultivate communities of explicit gratitude, not assumed gratitude. Explicit promises made and kept. Explicit truth-telling and grace sharing. Explicit hospitality. The worship team wants to come up. I'm just going to invite us to end this way as we come to the table. We remember this week and for future weeks as we deal with sort of slander and gossip and how our tongues can light a fire in our families and in our communities. We remember that our personal life and our microchurches can flourish or burn with these little things called words. And in a verbally reactive world that's on fire, it should be our aim to cultivate freshwater springs of verbally intentional communities that flourish, that offers a little bit of water to the forest fire. And as the fire burns around us, a mouth that is measured and careful and humble and intentional and surrendered to Jesus. I just have to be clear with you, and we should be clear with each other. Functioning that way will not get you any rewards in this world. None. Nor will it feel like it's very impactful, like you're making a difference on the world around you. It's actually quite the opposite. If you decide to tame your tongue and take responsibility for your words and be measured and careful and humble and bear figs as a fig tree and to be intentional, it won't get you noticed at work. It won't achieve you leadership or some gravitas in your neighborhood or among those to whom you feel sent or those who you love or the social context you're in. It won't garner you a following. It'll actually do quite the opposite. The people who get the following are the people who are loose-lipped and reactive. The people that the way that the patterns of this world reward people are the ones who actually have normalized slander and gossip and reactivity and sparks that bring flames. To pick a people that you're against and to do the us versus them thing, to find the people that you're for and to just constantly regurgitate the us versus them things that are often untrue. It won't get you noticed. It won't get you leadership. It might actually do the opposite. Actually, it's proven on social media that if you contribute on social media in a way that's encouraging and well differentiated, they'll throttle you downward. You'll get less likes, less interactions, all that kind of stuff. The more inflammatory you are, the more forest fires you try to start, the more it increases. I've looked because in the last couple of years there was a year where Monica Sanders, she's not in here, but Monica was posting Bible verses all the time. You guys remember that? I don't even know if she's doing it anymore. But she was posting Bible verses all the time. And I used to see her in my newsfeed all the time. And then I was sort of is Monica off Facebook? And I went and looked, and it was she's just posting Bible verses. So I don't see it anymore. Because it throttles it. It's if you're trying to be a good contributor to the world. Nope, we're not in here. Not in here. It will actually using your tongue this way, surrendering to Jesus with your mouth this way, it will actually make you a suspect to the extremists. It will bring upon you sabotage from the loose-lipped. And we have to have the right expectations that taking responsibility for yourself and being disciplined with our words is not actually primarily, it's not a strategy for impact and to change the world and to make a difference. It's actually a means of resistance. The way that Sabbath is resistance to a world obsessed with work. And generosity is a resistance to a world obsessed with materialism and consumerism. Taming the tongue this way is resistance to a world that's obsessed with reactivity and slander. It's like throwing a water bottle at a forest fire. It's not a good strategy, but at some point you have to draw the line and resist. So in a verbally reactive world that's on fire, it should be our aim to cultivate fresh water springs of verbally intentional communities that flourish. To be the contrast people of God, to be a contrast kingdom, to scream to the watching world that we are not of man. But we actually have something else inside of us. We're actually abiding in a different tree, and we bear different fruit. So this morning, as we come to the table for communion, we remember that we were purchased at a price, and that the cross actually speaks the best word over us. And we live from that word. We move from that word. We breathe from that word. That we are beloved, that we are citizens of a different world, that we are ambassadors of a different kingdom, that we're sons and daughters of a different family with a better father. And we surrender the rights, the ownership of our words, of our tongues. We surrender it to Him. We let go of our ability to control, and we say, Lord, teach us, form us, shape us, convict us, walk with us. Give us the words when we don't have it. Help us by your body, by your blood, by your sacrifice for us. Teach us. Help us. Help us be your people. On the night He was betrayed, He took the bread and broke it, saying, this is my body broken for you. When you eat it in memory of me. And in the same way, He took the cup, saying, this cup is a new covenant, my blood shed for the forgiveness of sins. And when you drink it in memory of me. And so together as God's people, as His called out ones, as His contrast community who are planting deep wells of fresh springs of water in a burning forest, we come this morning and we remember that we belong to Him. So when you're ready, communion is available for you on the right and on the left. The elements given for you this morning.